D. It stands for destiny or fate. Recently, we saw none other than Scopper Gaban refer to Shanks as a so-called child of destiny. It sounded very much like he believed that behind this word, there truly lies a certain meaning, a weight, that Shanks was predestined to live a special life, a life touched by fate, simply because he is a child of destiny. Naturally, the question arises, what exactly could that mean? Not only for Shanks, but more broadly for the story of One Piece. If something like destiny really exists and plays a greater role in the narrative, then we shouldn't just ask what it generally could mean, but also, for example, whether it can be connected to the D, especially since the word destiny fits so well with the D. First of all, against this background, we should take a closer look at Shanks. At its core, is there more behind the title Child of Destiny, or did Gaban just say it without any deeper reason? I strongly doubt the latter, particularly when you consider that on Laugh Tale there clearly exists a form of prophecy. I find it very plausible that the Roger Pirates learned that Shanks is a so-called child of destiny. If they told Shanks about this after reaching Laugh Tale, that could also explain his shift in plans. After all, at first he wanted to do something together with Buggy, and then he very clearly changed his mind, which we saw at Roger's execution, where the split between Buggy and Shanks took place. What exactly it means to be a child of destiny, what lies behind it, I don't want to go into detail about right now, especially since I've already made a video on that subject. But one thing I do want to highlight, Shanks' role in the overarching story definitely fits with the idea that he stands in a special relationship with destiny itself. By pure coincidence, he just so happened to be on Elbaf at the very moment the Harold incident took place, and he was even speaking about Harold as it all began to unfold. Before that, of course, he also just so happened to be on Mary Jawa's at the exact time when Harold was present there as well. In any case, the incident ran its course, and somehow the legendary devil fruit of the giants was involved. Shortly after, the Nika fruit, possibly the legendary fruit, ended up on a world government ship, where Shanks then stole it. For some reason, he decided to sail into East Blue, and once again, by pure chance, he landed in Fuchsia Village, where Luffy happened to be. He kept the fruit for a year, only to bring it with him to the tavern, where Luffy ended up eating it, the perfect person for this devil fruit. And in this regard, there are even more moments with Shanks, where he appears at just the right time and in just the right place, thereby shaping the greater course of events in the One Piece world. Another clear example of this is his sudden appearance at Marineford. So, I would say it strongly looks as though Shanks has a close connection with destiny itself. Even if he is the only one so far who has been explicitly called a child of destiny, he is not the only person who seems to have an intimate link to fate-driven events. Above all others, yes. Even above Shanks naturally stands Luffy. However, as the protagonist, Luffy already occupies a special role in this regard. So instead of focusing specifically on him, I'd rather turn to other bearers of the D, and examine whether moments of destiny also seem to shape their paths. And by that I don't just mean the world-shaking events that alter history itself, but also those occurrences that, when looked at individually, are extremely unlikely, since these are exactly the kinds of things that should stand out to us. Returning to Shanks for a moment, when we look closely, such moments truly do stand out. How likely is it, for example, that after finding the Nika fruit, Shanks would decide to sail into the East Blue of all seas, and then, out of all the islands available to him there of which there are many, he would choose Dawn Island. And not just Dawn Island, but from all the possible harbors, he specifically decided to dock at Fuchsia Village. We don't know whether he had any particular information that guided him there, but if not, then what we're looking at is simply an extremely improbable scenario, one where destiny may very well have had its hand at work. And when I think about scenarios like this, where the D seem to be accompanied by fate itself, the story of Law in particular stands out. Individual moments, but also his journey as a whole, clearly carry the mark of destiny. If we look at individual moments, one clear example would be the time when Law, out of all possible Marines he could have encountered, just happened to cross paths with Virgo. But as I said, it's not only these isolated moments, the entirety of his story could be considered. Many different elements come together, each of them already highly improbable on their own, and when combined, they form a greater whole full of unlikely coincidences. And yet this unlikely chain of events ultimately has an enormous impact on Luffy's story, and thus on the history of the entire world. The world government, in pursuit of short-term profit, allows an Amber Lead outbreak to ravage his country and then decides to completely wipe out the population. There is only one survivor, Law, a D. Bearing hatred in his heart, he somehow ends up with the Don Quixote family, led by a former celestial dragon. He reveals his D name purely by chance to Corazon, who at least has some understanding of what it means, and why it would be dangerous to let Doflamingo know about it. Corazon takes pity on Law and tries to help him. The two grow close, like family, but their search for a cure initially yields no results, until, purely by chance, word spreads of the Ope no Mi, the one devil fruit that could save Law, or rather, allow Law to save himself. Out of all the countless fruits on the seas, it's that exact one. And he's only able to use it to heal himself because, once again by coincidence, he had already been prepared and trained to become a doctor. And once again, purely by chance, Corazon happens to be in the perfect position to obtain the crucial information needed to steal the fruit. And so he does. Corazon hands Law a letter, instructing him to deliver it to a marine. Against all odds, that letter ends up in the hands of Virgo. In the end, Corazon sacrifices himself so that Law can live. Doflamingo kills his own brother, igniting in Law a hatred that drives him for the rest of his life, a hatred that sets him on the path of revenge. This path, in turn, leads Law onto the road of piracy. He forms a crew, becomes a supernova, meets Luffy, and for some reason decides to save him at Marineford. Most likely, several factors came together there. The fact that Luffy bore the D in his name, a certain sympathy Law had already formed during their first meeting, and the thought that Luffy could be a valuable ally in his future struggle against Doflamingo. After all, who would be better suited than the supernova who had already taken down multiple warlords? In other words, a series of improbable events in Law's life led him, more or less, directly to Luffy. This eventually grew into an alliance, and later into a true friendship. And this alliance, along with the help of a few others, not only brought down Doflamingo, but later also Kaido and Big Mom. In the fight against the latter, especially against Kaido, Luffy awakened his devil fruit, unlocking the form he would need in order to one day overthrow the world government and truly change the world. If we assume that Luffy stands at the very center of destiny, and that this destiny aims toward bringing about a transformation of the world, then wouldn't it also be possible that fate had its hand in shaping Law's story as well? In that case, the question naturally arises, just how much influence does destiny truly hold? Is everything already set in stone? Could that be why someone during the Void Century was able to foresee the future and turn it into a prophecy? Personally, I don't think it's carved in stone. Rather, I imagine it more like a force that bends or influences probabilities. But people themselves still have to create those probabilities in the first place. If Luffy had given up early in any one of his battles, not even fate would have been able to save him. That's the idea. And who knows, perhaps there are powers such as Imu, or even the gods mentioned in the Hall of History, that naturally serve to counteract this force. That is, if destiny truly is such an active power in the first place. At the very least, Blackbeard and his crew seem to believe in this idea of destiny, which brings us to yet another bearer of the D. I don't want to dive into Blackbeard's entire life here, but even in his case, there are moments that are incredibly unlikely. One could point to his discovery of the Yami Yami no Mi, but I wouldn't even highlight the discovery itself, or at least not only that, but rather the timing. He had searched for this fruit his entire life, and then he just so happened to find it at precisely the right moment, so that his journey would run parallel to Luffy's. Interesting, isn't it? And this trend continues with other Ds. Take for example the storm during Shiki's attack on Roger's fleet. Maybe someone secretly intervened without us knowing, but it could just as easily have been destiny itself. Beyond that, every confirmed D, and I mean truly everyone, has had some kind of significant impact on the course of world history. Some directly, others indirectly. Clover and Saul, for instance, both shaped Robin's path. Without Saul, Robin likely never would have joined the Straw Hats, and she is absolutely essential for reading the poneglyphs. Without Clover, she never would have learned how to read them in the first place. Porgus de Rouge prolonged her pregnancy long enough to give Ace a chance at life. And Ace, in turn, had a tremendous impact on world history, more or less directly because of Marineford, but also indirectly through his influence on Luffy, which was enormous. But, and this is important to emphasize, not every D seems surrounded by improbable coincidences, at least not from what we've been shown. And there are also individuals who were probably D, but didn't stand out in such a way. For example, Law's family. They were never confirmed to be bearers of the D, but most likely they were. Admittedly, we don't know much about them, and from what little we do know, their greatest impact seems to lie only in their connection to Law himself. But aside from that, the point remains. Every confirmed D has had a major impact on the course of world history, whether directly or indirectly. That doesn't necessarily prove a connection to destiny, but it does fit the idea rather well, and you have to admit, there's a clear pattern forming. In particular, the Ds, who are most clearly surrounded by improbabilities, seem to have the strongest link to fate. So, could it be that the D truly stands for destiny? Taken all together, I would say it's definitely a possibility. Still, I'm not sure whether that description is entirely accurate or complete. What do I mean by that? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, Shanks was explicitly referred to as a child of destiny. Unless his mother was secretly a D, then here we have a character who is clearly touched by fate, but does not carry the name. At least, Shanks doesn't bear the D in his name, but perhaps he should. Even if his parents weren't Ds, maybe the title was originally less about bloodline and more about a collection of people closely tied to the destiny of the world, people who shaped it, or at least influenced it, perhaps even in the ancient struggle against Imu and the forces that stand behind or beside him. The same gods mentioned in the Hall of History who opposed the Sun God. Another figure who might deserve to bear the D could be Sabo, which would give the entire Sabo scene even more depth. And beyond that, think back to the case of Nefertari Lili. How is she able to hide her D from Imu and the other founders? Shouldn't other members of her family have borne the name as well? Perhaps even before she ever came into contact with the 20 founders? If Lili was the very first member of her house to be touched by the destiny of the world, then it's possible she could have concealed it. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And with that, here's another video you might enjoy. Until next time, ciao, and see you again soon.